Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 118. My name is NBZ, and I am a licensed driver, even though I haven't driven in 5 years. I just got a car.
This is impressive. This is big. NBZ has a car.
I know, it's crazy. So I'm going to be crashing into all sorts of things. So hopefully not.
I've also not driven since my test, and that was about 7 years ago.
Probably 6 years ago, right?
Yeah, I think you might have passed before me. I can't even remember now.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, and time is a flat circle.
Does it feel good? Have you got the knack back?
It does. It feels good. Because I was driving my dad's car for a while, and now I'm on this one, and I feel like I know what I'm doing.
Were you driving a stick?
No, I wasn't. I was driving an automatic, and I now have an automatic, so that makes my life a whole lot easier.
Did you learn automatic?
I didn't. No, I learned on manual.
Manual.
Anyway, enough car talk. This isn't Top Gear over here. We don't have any Clarksons on this show. Instead, we have Bally's. Hi, Bally. How are you?
I'm very good, MBZ. I've been quite busy, but I've still squeezed in the games. Squeezed them in.
You got to do it.
I had my birthday. That happened. So then I got
right?
more games.
Yeah,
just as I had no time to play games, I got more games. That's what happened.
Yeah. What did you get for your birthday?
Caroline got me Rayman Legends and Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, and because I told her, we can buy Blu-rays now. She picked up The Last Jedi on Blu-ray. It was my first ever Blu-ray, which is awesome. So
it's a good first Blu-ray to have, I think.
Thank you, Caroline. That was a great birthday present.
Yeah, so because you never owned Rayman Legends on Wii U, because I lent it to you.
I borrowed from you, and I beat it in, I don't know, a couple of weeks, and then I think I gave it back to you. So yeah, it's nice to own, and like Caroline got hard copies of both, so she can give them a go at some point. And 2D platformers are something she's not tried out yet.
They're both very good, so it's a high bar to start with for sure. Yes, we have a lot of things coming up in the show. Obviously, stay tuned for the end, where we're going to be talking about the next couple of episodes and E3 plans, because E3 is almost very nearly here. We're very close, so that's exciting. So be sure to stick around to the end to listen to that stuff. But Bally, you have in your head the words to say about what the other things we're going to be talking about on the show are. So why don't you splooge them out on this podcast right now?
First segment, we're going to be talking about what we've been playing. Second segment will be some emails that you all sent in. And the third segment is going to be a discussion on a couple of big rumors that have come about, most notably Pokemon Let's Go, Pikachu and Eevee, and Starfox Grand Prix.
Yes, many weird things happening in the rumor sphere, the leak sphere right now.
So much weird things.
A lot to dig into there. It's exciting times, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about that in the next few weeks with E3 and everything coming. But let's kick things off, Bally, with a little bit of video games we've been digging into in the last couple of weeks. I know you've been on your PS4 and doing God of War Uncharted. Have you taken a break yet from the PS4?
I have taken a break. I was intending to give Inside a go, but I just kind of ran out of time, and then I wanted to play something not on the PS4. So I went with a game I picked up in a sale quite recently, and that is Severed.
Yes.
I want to say, MBZ, when we started this podcast, there was a list, and there were loads of games that you wanted me to try. That list, as we keep going, is getting smaller.
This year especially, you have really dug into some indies on Switch.
Axiom Verge, I've really gone for it. And the number of awesome indies on Switch is really helping me get through these all. And Severed was another one you recommended that you played when it came out around about 2016.
I actually played it last year.
Right, you played it. Oh, I remember it, yes. So Drinkbox Studios came out in 2016 on Vita. Then later that year, it came out on Wii U, 3DS, and iOS. Yep. And then it came out on Switch last summer. And
I picked it up in a sale on Vita last year, so that's when I played it.
Right. And for those who don't know, it's essentially Fruit Ninja, the dungeon crawling adventure game.
It's a good pitch, actually. It's a good pitch.
You laugh at that description, but it's accurate. That's literally what it is.
Except I would say that Fruit Ninja gives it short shrift, because you aren't flailing.
I've not played Fruit Ninja. I'm just talking about it very surface level, let's say. So you have the reason it's called Severed is because when you kill an enemy, as long as your meter is charged up, you then have the ability within a very short space of time to sever its limbs or parts and gain loot, essentially. So the loop of gaining those parts upgrades your skill tree, where you can improve stuff like your ability to buff attack, defense, strength. You can like buff a charged move. You become more powerful when your meter is charged. There's all these things you can buff, and that loop of like killing enemies, severing their limbs for loot, and then upgrading your skill tree is that's the best bit of the game in my view. That's the core game. There's a lot of walking around using the mini map, and that's maybe one downside of the game, is that you're looking at the minimap an awful lot of the time, and it maybe takes you out of the action a bit, because the map itself is actually a sequence of images. They don't actually merge together, which is quite an unusual thing to see in modern video games.
Right, it's not like a traditional first-person game where you're moving your character and they are in real time moving. It's basically you push forward on an analog stick and your character will transition from one scene to another scene down the corridor, and the artwork will kind of fade in and out. And it was one of the interesting things when I played the game was it seemed like a more cost-effective way to make this style of game, when Drinkbox are traditionally a studio that makes 2D games, right? And so to make a 3D game, to keep their art style and to keep everything we love about how their games look, I think that's the kind of decision they made there. And I think it works, honestly.
Right, and it's a very impressive art style, and it's a very... So the theming of the game is like... all three of your relatives are dead, and this dragon is like gonna eat their bodies or something, and you have to rescue their bodies, and you're like in this alternate realm, and it's very dark. There's a lot of death going on, and the enemies look real. A lot of them look quite creepy, and there's a couple of characters here and there that are very freaky, and you kind of think like, this is all like if the art style wasn't so colorful and bright, this is not the kind of world I want to hang out in generally in video games. Like, I'm really not into that sort of stuff. So it's quite a nice take on what is essentially a very dark
And
game.
Your main character has like her arm cut off as well, doesn't she?
Right. She has her arm cut off, and that plays into the story later, and I'm not going to ruin it because there's interesting stuff that happens, but it's just a really interesting world to be in. I wasn't very satisfied. I think the conclusion of the story wasn't great, but not that this is a story-driven game in the slightest, but there's a little bit at the end that I would have liked to have seen a different outcome, but I'm not going to get into that. I think that it's a pretty tough game. Like, there's like a very smooth trajectory of difficulty. It gradually gets more difficult. And as I said, that skill tree is very satisfying. And I really made an effort of making sure I'd sever the parts off of basically every enemy I faced. Like, it was a massive failure if I missed an enemy. I'd want to get all the parts because that's the quickest way to upgrade. And there are points in the game where it does feel a bit easier because you might have overpowered slightly, but they quickly like throw in some tougher enemies to mix things up. So there's two more abilities I've not mentioned that mix things up. So one is the ability to freeze the enemy. So you get this extra meter that charges up very slowly, and then when you press it, you give the enemy freezes for a few seconds. You can then buff that freeze ability up so they are frozen for longer. You can freeze multiple enemies at a time, etc., etc. Some enemies you can't freeze.
Yeah, and I think the reason that freeze is important, right, is because as you get later on in the game, a lot of the combat becomes managing the number of enemies you have at one time. Right. And sometimes, like, they all have different animations, right? And at the bottom of the screen, there is a kind of circle that will tick around to tell you, okay, this one's charging up, this one is almost ready to attack. And so you have to switch your view and angle on the enemy to make sure you are dealing with the ones that are fast and leaving the ones who are slow to later on. Yeah. And so freezing becomes very important if you have a very active enemy that you want to put out the picture for a little bit so you could handle things. It's a smart way to kind of deal with those situations that crop up.
And you really don't want to take damage in this game. You take a lot of damage. Even with your defense fully buffed, like, you take an awful lot of damage when you get hit. So to deflect attacks, you have to notice when the enemy's about to attack, and then if they've got like an arm attack, like where they swing their arm at you with a claw or something, you have to their arm will go red, and then you have to flick their arm back at the right exact angle.
Yeah, very particular about angles in this game, which is one thing I really like about it, is it doesn't become... Because the danger of a touchscreen game, right, as you mentioned with Fruit Ninja, which is just a spam fest of just like, oh, I'm just going to waggle my finger across the screen and try and get as many points as possible. This game is much more deliberative about that, and it rewards you for it, right? Because if you get a bunch of hits in a row without it being blocked, you're building up a meter to a special that you can then unleash, and that allows you to just go crazy without having to worry about hitting them in kind of defensive areas.
And on top of that, they give you're rewarded with more damage by doing longer swipes. So essentially, like the little swipes, don't get me wrong, there are some enemies where the little swipes, you just need to get that little one area that you're able to hit, but certain enemies where they might have a larger hitbox that you can aim for, the larger swipes definitely are more where to go for those. And that mixing up is great. And the other ability that I've not mentioned yet, that I also used a bit, was it's the ability to steal buffs off enemies. So later in the game, maybe in the last half of the game, enemies will be given stuff like magic resistance, attack boost, defense boost.
Speed is the one that is the hard to deal with, that you need to get rid of.
Speed, where they're attacking you a lot faster. And then you gain the ability where you can steal one of their abilities. I mean, you can't steal a magic resistance because what you're using is magic. So sometimes you get an enemy with magic resistance and then 3 other buffs. And you're like, oh god, I really need to deal with this guy first because he's just going to absolutely destroy me. But things like that just really mix up the formula, and I don't think the game overstays its welcome. It's quite a short game. It's maybe 6, 7, 8 hours. And
yeah, it's perfectly pitched in that way for me. It was just it's
really well pitched. There's sort of 3 large areas that you visit, and they get progressively harder. I do think the final boss is quite a jump.
It is a pretty big spike. I had a tough time with it for sure. It's difficult.
It's tough, and like the Switch is quite a heavy system. I've not held a Vita, but it is lighter.
Right, this is what I was going to ask you about, right? Is because for me, when I was playing on Vita, it was a little bit awkward. But with the Switch, especially with the Joy-Cons on one side and like the heavier tablet in the center, when I was playing, I was holding it with my left hand and using my right hand to swipe. So really, all the kind of weight is going on one hand. How did you deal with that with the Switch?
Yeah, it's tiring. If I played for longer than 45 minutes to an hour, it was pretty tough. And I did play this game in quite a number of play sessions. I'd play half an hour here, another 45 minutes here and there. So I did mix it up quite a bit. And like you recommended, like, oh, Bally, why don't you just take the Joy-Con off on the right side? And I was like, that's a good idea because you only need the left Joy-Con to move. So I thought, right, I'll try that. The game doesn't work like that. Like it will actually, the game just stops. Like
really?
It won't continue until you have both Joy-Cons attached. Yeah, for whatever reason.
That's a shame.
Maybe Nintendo don't like games being played with one Joy-Con plugged into the system or something crazy like that. I wouldn't rule it out with Nintendo.
My advice would have been to just lay it flat on a table because honestly, the movement isn't like timing or kind of pressure based. It's just like exploration.
I enjoyed it most when I was leaning over and the weight was on my lap, and then I could really go for it with my finger.
But I mean, that's another thing to say is like this is one of those games that you cannot play without taking it out of the dock. Like you can't play this on the TV. Right. It has to be on your hand. It's a touchscreen based game. Like that's just how it's developed. So yeah, keep that in mind if you like the sound of this, but don't like taking your Switch out of your dock, basically.
Overall, I absolutely love innovation. Yeah. This game is nothing like anything I've ever played, really.
It's such a fresh thing, right? And it's one of those genres in terms of like a first-person dungeon crawler. That's the kind of game I've never played before, and I'm not super into it, but Severed made the pitch on that genre to me that made me fall into it and be like, okay, I get this and I get why this idea works, especially because they do have some kind of exploration based puzzles later on and like opening doors to get back to previous areas, and there's some other kind of hidden secret stuff that's kind of difficult to find, but yeah, I think it's really good. I was so surprised at how much I liked it, especially because it's so different from Guacamelee, which is what they worked on previously. So yeah,
I'd highly recommend if put it on your watch list if you have a Switch, and if it's on sale anytime soon. I bought this on sale. It's well worth picking up. It's not a long game. I think that it's its own genre to a degree. The way that it just does touchscreen and dungeon crawling, like that is a great concept, and I'd highly recommend anyone to try it. And yeah, let us know what you think if you get a go. But that's
great.
Severed. MBZ. What have you been doing?
Yeah, so maybe let's jump in with your quick thoughts on Runner 3, Bitrate Runner 3, because I've played most of that game. I finished it technically, even though there's a lot of other stuff to do, but that came out recently, and we're both excited about it, and reviews have been a little mixed. There have been some problems, which I'll kind of discuss, but give me your first impressions on Runner 3, the follow-up to Bitrate Runner 2, one of the best Wii U games that we played.
So I'm only a few levels into World 1, and straight away I love the art style, I love the music. I think the world that they create is just zany and fun and great.
Foodland is a good place to start, right? Because you have all these oversized things in the background. It's incredibly bright.
Yes.
Like it feels like they're a lot more creative with the worlds that you're in this time, as opposed to, because Runner 2 has really great level design, but I don't recall a lot of the areas you're going through, you know?
Right, exactly. I'm trying to, there's like some character in the first world who's called like Sir Strom or something. And I was like, that's that Swedish delicate. That's like a Scandinavian delicacy.
Oh, really?
Which is like a can of rotten fish. And I've just Googled it, and it's actually called like Surströmming. Okay. I don't know how to pronounce it. Apologies to Swedish listeners, but it's this delicacy which is rotten fish, and it's actually referenced in the game. And like, are Gaijin games from Scandinavia? I don't know.
Think so. I think they're American. Yeah, I can't remember. They're not called Gaijin games anymore, are they? They're called Choice Provisions now. So they changed the name of the company. But yeah, it's definitely, so that character you came across, I only actually came across that today because there are these weird like side quests in the game, I guess, because he's like, oh, go find these 3 things in these worlds and they will pop up as soon as you meet him. So you go back through levels to try and find these collectibles that you'll give to him.
But I mean, I'm really enjoying it so far. It's definitely, compared to World 1 of Runner 2, it's a lot harder, but I'm like, I can handle 2D platforms.
Yeah.
I love them. Like, I don't mind that. I like a challenge. And I'm looking forward to see what the rest of the game has to offer.
Yeah. So I've gone through the whole thing, as I said, and this game has a lot of stuff in it, even though it is relatively shorter in terms of like there's only 3 main worlds, and that is
really?
So that's definitely not as long as Runner 2 was. But there's kind of extra levels you unlock by getting a certain number of gold bars, and then every single level has what's called a gem run, which means that the second time you go through it, you can do a different path, which is maybe a bit more difficult, and it has these gems, and the gems are a sort of currency that you use to buy costumes and outfits and that kind of thing. So you don't really need to collect them. It's more of a, hey, if you want to do this stuff, you can go and do it. And I like doing it for the challenge because I like those levels and I like the way that you run through them. I've always just been a fan of the way these games feel. I never actually played the original Bitrate Runner, but 2 has a very distinctive kind of mapping of like you're using the stick to go around in circles, you're jumping, you're sliding, you're jumping and kicking and sliding at the same time. There's a real motion to it and a fluidity to it that goes along with the rhythm and the beat that I really enjoy. And so as I've gone through, I've continued to enjoy that, but it definitely, for me, this is not a game that is as well designed as Runner 2, I think, in terms of the levels. And I think one reason for that is that they are very long. I don't know if you've noticed this so far.
They really are long, aren't they?
But it feels like they had the kind of the old idea of a checkpoint is a one thing in a level and we'll leave it at that. These levels are long enough to where they should have had multiple checkpoints, I think, because there are certainly long stretches with lots of difficult things in them that I am sure will frustrate people. Now, for me, I'm fine with that because I really love, as you know, let me put this out here. I'm someone who beat every seaside in Celeste this year, so I'm a glutton for punishment when it comes to this kind of game. There are other people who I guess would have enjoyed Runner 2 and will find this a bit more frustrating in those terms. I've seen reviews say as such, because there's other stuff in there which seems a little bit unfair in terms of kind of gotcha game design. I think we talked about this a lot when we talk about old Mario games, right? Mario 3 especially for me has so much gotcha level design where they throw something there knowing that you're going to run into it and die instantly.
Contra 3?
Contra 3, absolutely. Contra 3 has gotcha level design fucking everywhere. It's also, mechanically, I love Contra 3 way more than, say, a Mario game. So that's where it comes down to me. It's like, I can handle the gotcha bullshit if I like the mechanics of the game a certain amount. And I mean, you know, we got through that game by save stating, so fair enough. But Runner 3 has a lot more of that, and one example I'll bring up...
a lot more 3D.
It does. So that's another kind of problem. There are these two problems, I would say, is there are moments where a thing will just appear out of thin air, and you will, if it's your first time through the level, you will literally not have enough time for your body to react or your brain to trigger to your thumb to say duck at this moment, because it just comes out of nowhere and there's no forewarning, there's no good indication that it's coming. You kind of just need to die and remember it's there for next time, you know, which is fine when the game is about dying and you have to keep going. But I think one of the things that was good about Runner 2 was if you were tuned in and like dialed in, you could get through a hard level first time if you were just really reactive to it and you knew what was going on. Whereas here, it feels like they didn't want that to happen. They wanted you, maybe because it's a shorter game overall, they wanted you to replay sections of levels a bit more, so they may have thrown those in for that reason. I'm not sure the decision, but there is this one enemy in particular, which is this knight character, and they have a shield and a sword, and you have like less than a millisecond to see what action they're going to take. Maybe I'm being a bit over dramatic, but like it's very, very short period of time for them to they'll either jump, allowing you to slide under, or they'll stick out their sword in front of them, which means you have to jump over them, or they'll hold up their shield, which means you kick through them. And knowing which one of those three actions you have to take is completely bullshit. And there is a section in one level where there are 4 knights in a row, and every time I didn't know what it was going to do, so I just went through one, died, remembered, got to the second one, died, remembered what it was, and I'm just having to put this in the back of my mind like, okay, so it's duck, then kick, then jump, then duck, or whatever. And that's bad, like, because a good game when it comes to indicating what is there is not going to give you less than 2 seconds. It's one thing that people don't like about Sonic games is Sonic runs really fast and oh no, I ran straight into an enemy, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
no, I struggle with both, well, mainly in the first few levels of this game, and I did a little bit in the last game, is jumping up steps.
Yes, like, there's a difficult timing to it. You definitely need to be careful about it. And it gets harder later on because you get a double jump. And so if you're slightly not on the step, you'll accidentally double jump instead of jumping straight off the step, kind of midair. Which is tough. It's also... there's a lot of kind of feeling the music, and I think once you try and get the rhythm of it down, it definitely helps a lot more in those situations.
Yeah, I do enjoy avoiding the podcast with a game like this.
Yes, you have to be listening to the music for this. It definitely is definitely kind of tune yourself in for it. And then the other thing that you mentioned, the weird angle. So sometimes you'll go round a corner and there'll be like a giant rock in front of you, and it's like, what? Like, I get that they're trying to do something to put you, like, turn you off a little bit, but a lot of the time it feels like they are deliberately throwing something in there for you to die so that you have to play through it again to remember it for next time. And as I said, like, I'm kind of fine with that because I'm the sort of person who will sit here and just play it a bunch of times because I really like the mechanics and I just like going through it. But if you are the kind of person who will get frustrated by that, I got to tell you, there's quite a bit of that in this game. And the kind of camera angle stuff isn't awful all the time. Moments when it's going around corners, it will often be a bit slower, so you kind of have the time to figure it out. But your depth perception gets completely lost because you are either coming towards the camera at an angle or you're going round a bend that seems difficult to judge, and there might be an enemy there and a gold bar, and you're kind of moving it around. It's a little bit difficult to sort it out. But there's also these sort of vehicle sections. I'm not sure if you've played any of those yet, but there's one where you go in a plane. You're in a plane going up and down.
I did do a plane one. Yeah, that was strange.
There's like some section where you go behind the back and you're in a kind of car and you're kind of doing it not first person, but you're behind the back instead of side to side. So those are cool. I think those are a neat way to change up the pace and the level design and that kind of thing. But the other thing that I find really weird about this game is it really feels like a very hardcore kind of speedrunner type game, in the sense that, you know, in Smash Brothers where you, like, an advanced technique, I'm making myself sound like such a noob for saying an advanced technique, but when you want to get quickly to the ground, like, you'll hold down the analog stick to, like, do a quick drop, basically.
Right,
like quick
so
drop.
you can jump and then quick drop
yes.
to get under.
And I don't know if you've come across this yet, but within the first world, I found that if I wanted to get every gold bar in a level, I really had to do a quick drop. Many moments to...
I've already found that, yeah. It helps an awful lot.
Yeah, and I was watching the Quick Look, which Ben Pack did, and he was being like, look at this shit, you really need to kind of get used to these systems in terms of quickly dropping at certain moments in order to get collectibles, and that 100% continues throughout the game, and I actually really like it. I think it adds a lot of advanced feel to the movement, and it makes you feel like you have a lot more control, because in this game where it's not endlessly running, but you don't have control over left or right or whatever, you're just going, having that ability to cut short a jump and to duck under something feels like I'm much more kind of able to manipulate where I'm going and where I'm supposed to be. But again, like, it feels like an advanced technique that you need to know from the get-go. Otherwise, you're going to have a rough time trying to get everything. And that is the thing. Like, when it comes to these games, I want to collect every goddamn gold bar. And so there were moments where I was going through a level and I deliberately kill myself because I missed one. I'm like, nope, I'm getting everything. I'm doing this. And I want to do it. And that's a good thing, I think, in terms of how this game is put together. It compels me to want to do that. And so, yeah, I've enjoyed that quite a bit. There's a lot of stuff to do still, and I want to go back. I want to do the gem runs. I want to find some bonus characters, see if I can unlock Shovel Knight or Charles Martinet, because he's in there as well. See if I can do that. But yeah, overall, I would say that this is a step up in difficulty from Runner 2, and it feels like a sequel in the sense that it expects you to have played Runner 2 and to be proficient at its systems.
Is it a step up in quality?
Quality is a hard thing to say, because I think overall the level design in Runner 2 is probably better overall. It's tighter, It's more well designed, it has more variety, I think. Like, the whole analog stick going around in circles just doesn't pop up in this game. It's just not a mechanic that they use.
That makes me excited, actually.
Really? I really like that.
I wasn't a huge fan of the circle ones. No.
I love that stuff in Runner 2. I was like, oh, this feels really cool. So I would say it's a little less polished as well. Like, when you collect gold bars, sometimes it feels like the sound is a little off and the animation is not very good.
Yeah, I've already found that there's something about the way that it plays on Switch just isn't quite smooth.
No.
Whether it's graphically or mechanically, or a combination.
The frame rate can get rough at times, definitely.
Yeah, I don't know.
It drops. It's definitely a better experience on other platforms. PC especially, it'll be much better. But portably is what I played a lot of it on, so that's the compromise you make, right? It's like, I loved having it in my hand and just playing a bunch of it that way. So
yeah, I mean, it's a great handheld game.
Yeah, it's 100% that kind of style. So I have a hard time fully recommending it, because it is a weird thing where, for me, it's giving me what I like and what I want, and it's really difficult, and I kind of want that from this game, but I totally understand where a lot of the reviews are coming from and where people are getting frustrated with it, because the levels are longer than they should be, and there are a lot of gotcha moments, and if you don't want to be replaying a bunch and you're not caring about collecting everything, you just want to see the levels, maybe not for you. So there you go. But
nice.
I really like Runner 3.
I'll try and beat it for next time.
Sure. The other thing that I quickly played today, downloaded the demo for Sushi Strikers, which was that game they showed off at E3 last year, originally for 3DS, and it's basically a weird action rhythm puzzle. I can't describe it. What you're doing is you're basically linking up same colored plates of sushi on conveyor belts as they go past, and as you eat the sushi you collect all these plates, and then you basically throw the plates at your opponent to do damage to them. So you both have like health bars, and you have to get like the higher the stack is, the more damage it will do. So when you're collecting these plates and doing, it's kind of a mix between, I don't know, is Candy Crush an equivalent thing? Match 3? It's not really Match 3, but it's matching.
Did you know I've never played Candy Crush?
I'm sure you haven't. Neither have I, but it's an easy thing to say for majority of people, so that's why I use it as an example. But it's that idea of matching a bunch of things together, and kind of building them up and then throwing them. So the weird thing about this game is it feels way higher budget than I thought it would be. When you boot it up, there's a full like fucking anime thing, like an intro to an anime, basically, with music and all these characters. It feels like Food Wars, the anime, you know, the one that I watched, in a sense that like they're showing all these characters and like all this dramatic music's happening. It's very, very J-pop. And then you start it and there's a whole like voice acted cutscene, and there's a bunch of voice acting in the dialogue. It's very colorful, and there's this story. There's a whole war, like the war of the sushi between the Republic and the Empire won, and now everyone is banned from eating sushi and only the Empire can eat sushi, and it's a really very Japanese wacky setup for a game that is essentially kind of matching plates and throwing them at people. They definitely create a world around it, and I was surprised at that, because I thought it would just be, I don't know, like Picross, where you just go through a bunch of levels, you know, and you just fight a bunch of people. But no, they have like a whole setup for it, and it's a full thing. It's very impressive in that sense. The thing that I didn't expect was it has kind of an RPG leveling system. So one of the things that happens early on is that you get introduced to these characters called sushi sprites, which are kind of like yokai from like Yokai Watch or Pokemon or whatever. They're kind of like animal companion friends that I imagine you'll collect a bunch along the way as you go through the game. And they each have certain abilities. So the first guy you get has a special where it will turn every plate the same color. So you can just you can wait until there's loads of plates on the screen, activate it, and then you just collect like 25 plates at once, and then that's huge damage that you can launch at your enemy. And so they level up with you. I'm sure they'll get new skills as you go through, but you can have like 3 of them attached at once, so you have 3 different specials you can launch whenever. One of the second ones that I got was a healing thing, so it turns every plate of food into candy, and you just eat all the candy to heal your health bar. So it feels like there's going to be a lot of depth in here. You know, you gain experience for each enemy you defeat, and you have a ranking system. You can get like S through E or whatever, like A rank, B rank, whatever. And so far, it has pitched me on an idea that I was pretty much checked out on. I was like, I saw Sushi Strikers. God, say that 10 times fast. Jesus. I was pretty checked out on it, having seen the E3 stuff. I was like, okay, it's kind of a matching game with some weird elements in it. It looks very chaotic. When you watch gameplay of it, it seems insane in a way that's hard to understand, but it's pretty quick to pick up. I learned it pretty easily. And it's not a game I'm going to go out and buy day one, but I'm certainly way more into it and interested in it than I was before. So I encourage you, if you have any kind of vague interest in Sushi Strikers, download the demo. It's on the Switch eShop, and give it a go. It's really weird and endearing in a way that I wasn't expecting. So yeah,
I'll pick it up for sure. I'm going away this weekend.
Yeah,
so I need more, even more, to play on my Switch.
Yeah, good to dig into. All right. Well, there we go. That's what we've been playing. Don't go anywhere, though, because we will be back after the break talking about some of your emails. See you in a bit.
Hey folks, welcome back to the show. It is the second segment, and that means it's time for your emails. But before I start, there are two main ways to get questions into the show. They are, of course, emails on our email address, which is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. And the other way is our Discord server. We've got a little thread over on our Discord server where you are most welcome to post an email, to post a question and a comment, and we'll try and read it out on the show. This week we've got a couple in from our Discord server. So without further ado, our first question from our Discord server is from Brandon from Arcata, California. Octopath Traveler's coming release has got me thinking about Nintendo's relationship with Pixelart. For the longest time, that was really the only way to make games, but with the jump to 3D for consoles in the 90s and later the 3DS for handhelds, pretty much every game coming from a Nintendo first party these days is in 3D. It seems that the indie space has filled the void left by the lack of Pixelart games coming from the big N. But here's my question for you both. If you could each have one game from a Nintendo first party developer be made in Pixelart, what series would it be, and what would they do to make it interesting? Thanks so much. Always a fan of the podcast and being able to chat in the Discord.
All right. Thank you, Brandon. That's a very interesting question because, oh my God, there are a lot of Nintendo games I would love to see in pixel art again.
Like, is there a game that wouldn't work in, like, modernized pixel art?
I don't know. I feel like there must be.
There's
there's definitely certain genres that are built around 3D.
I don't think that sort of 3D open world would work very well in pixel art, perhaps. I don't know.
I mean, you know, Breath of the Wild is based on the original Legend of Zelda, isn't it? To some degree.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's very effective. I get it at the time. People were like, holy shit, you can go anywhere. But looking at the original Zelda now is a little bit, I don't know, it doesn't quite evoke the same feelings, let's say, as what Breath of the Wild does.
I guess Nintendo made a pixel art game, and a very modern one at that. Isn't it surely Super Mario Maker?
Right, but like Super Mario Maker is also not pixel art if you want to play in the new Super Mario Brothers style.
True.
You know,
but I guess it's the only game they've ever done that has pixel art that is in widescreen.
Sure, I guess there must be another example. I don't know.
There's pixel art elements of Odyssey, which were greatly appreciated.
Technically.
Like that.
Yeah. That counts. Also, I guess, I mean, Link Between Worlds isn't pixel art, but the kind of side-scrolling wall stuff is different.
Sure.
I guess Mario Maker's a bit of a cheat, though, because all those are based on existing pixel art games that came out years ago.
That they morphed and changed, and yeah. Having just played Super Mario World, do you agree that it does feel different?
Yes, the physics definitely do. They modeled the physics for Mario Maker based on the newer game, so that's why I like them more, because they make sense and aren't rubbish like Mario 3, which sucks
when
ass.
You press the jump button.
Exactly. Oh my God. Like, people need to get over their Mario 3 obsession. Anyway, so, Bali, do you have one in particular that sticks out to you?
For the listeners that are still here, I think it's a boring answer, but I'm going to say 2D Metroid. I think that you look at a game like Axiom Verge, which I think, when you take the idea of art style and pixels, it does some really cool things and effects, like specific guns that do stuff based on pixels. And like the term high bit, like the high bit era where we have pixels that go beyond 16-bit or even 32-bit, like they go higher than that now, including games like Owlboy, which I think just look unbelievably good. Owlboy may be the best looking game I played this year. Like, it looks so beautiful. And
So I've also just started the new Castlevania-esque game, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, which is basically an NES Castlevania in terms of its pixel art, but it also has bosses in there which are just like, you couldn't do this on the NES. They're like really large, and they have so many colours and different things to them that make them more complex, and that's the kind of thing that I really appreciate, is like, now with these days power, is you can go back to that style, but also you can really pump it up and make it just look crazy.
Yeah.
I think Shovel Knight does an incredible job of that, of doing these really large screen-filling things that are like, holy shit, they did that with pixel art?
And you can go beyond the traditional sound card. And I mean, Shovel Knight's a good example of a game that actually went for quite a traditional sound. But then Arbor is a great example of a game that was just like, no, screw it, we're going full orchestra. It doesn't matter if this is pixel art, we're going to go full orchestra. And both games in their own right, I think, are great games, especially based on presentation. I think I want fully orchestrated 2D Metroid, high-bit pixel art from Nintendo on the Switch. Why not? I think that would be a glorious experience.
I actually think that there was a bit of a step back when you went from Fusion to Zero Mission in terms of the quality of the pixel art. Maybe because Zero Mission, they were going for a kind of thing that hewed maybe a bit closer to the look and feel of the original Metroid, even though obviously it's much more advanced. But there is a distinct difference in look between those two games.
Yeah.
And I think that it's already impressive what we have in Fusion with some of those bosses. Like Nightmare in particular is one that's just like very crazy and large and detailed.
Yeah.
But could you imagine like 16 by 9 these days Nightmare, where he has like 7 different forms and he's just this enormous monstrosity? Like Axiom Verge is actually a great example of that stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, you really felt that. Yeah.
Because there are some enormous bosses in that game, which just because they do this huge zoom out thing where your character is tiny and the boss is just looming and large.
I swear that boss is based on Nightmare, or like Kraid. It's a very...
There's one of them that is, yeah. That's really big. Is there anything else you think that they could do? Because like I really like pixel art for Metroid, but the game played fine when it was Samus Returns. You know, I think it played okay. I don't think the pixel art adds to that part of the game. Do you think there's anything else?
I think it's a great way for Nintendo to get out of the sort of 2D Mario hole they're stuck in right now, where the last game they made was Mario Maker. Fantastic game, can't deny that. But you look at the 4 new Super Mario Bros. Games and think, I mean, they're good games, but they're not groundbreaking. And when other Nintendo 2D platformers like DK Tropical Freeze are such great 2D platformers, surely a franchise as big as Mario needs to do a good game, not just an okay or good game. Like, it needs to be a great game. And I think you look at games like, oh my god, what's the Sonic game that just came out last year that's based
Mania?
on Sonic Mania, exactly. Like a Mario, so many podcasters have said this, but a Mario take on Sonic Mania, I think, is long overdue.
I mean, Mario doesn't really need to do that, I think, in terms of, you know, Sonic's quality was pretty dire by the time Sonic Mania came out. Like, he doesn't need saving in that way.
But 2D Mario is in a hole, even if the quality isn't bad.
Yes, like, those games are good to okay, but they don't inspire anything, do they? They're very bland in terms of their look. So Mario is definitely on my list of, like, please do something with Mario that isn't that horrifying 2.5D soulless new Super Mario Brothers aesthetic. Yeah, God. But for me, I would prefer Mario to be in a more hand-drawn style, you know, go even further with it. Like, pull a kind of Yoshi Kirby style thing where you're going a bit more different vibe.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, when they've gone for the big bold art style, it's ended up being Kirby and Yoshi more often than not. And, you know, reach out to Mario, reach out to Metroid. It's okay. You can experiment with them as well.
Yeah. The other thing that I really like about pixel art is it allows you to be very vibrant in different ways, you know? Like, there's a difference in terms of a 2.5D game versus a pixel art game. And they can both be bright and colourful, and I think Tropical Freeze is like a good example of that. But there's definitely a difference in terms of, like, Metroid Fusion I always go back to is, look at how, like, weird and blue and yellow and pink this game is. Like, it's got so many weird colours that seemingly work just because of the pixel art style
that no one could see until the SP came out.
Exactly, true. You need that backlight to help you out.
Need that backlight.
That's
but yeah,
good.
I mean, maybe a game like this might be announced at E3. Who knows? There might be something. Might be a surprise.
Yeah, I don't know. So the one thing with pixel art that I think is often discussed is it's very expensive to do pixel art these days. There are far fewer people who are skilled in that profession, just because as soon as 3D happened, a lot of those 2D artists went away. Like, they weren't hiring those people anymore. And so a lot of these big developers don't have that talent in their studios anymore. So what you'll often find is all these indie studios do it because they are people who are passionate about that stuff, and so they are either self-taught or whatever, or they have...
And it takes them a long time. Like, Arbor was 9 years, and I think Action Verge was a long time as well. Like,
exactly.
It's tough. It's tough if you're going to go down that route. And it's interesting where a company as big as Nintendo could probably pump out a game like that, even though it is very expensive, maybe quite a bit quicker than 9 years. So yeah. And I mean, like, the kind of subject of this question to some degree, Octopath Traveler, isn't itself purely sprite based. Like, it's doing this meshing which allows Square Enix to be like, okay, so we can do some pixel art stuff that looks really fucking cool, but also those backgrounds would take a long time if they were all pixel art, so how about let's just render those in 2D and 3D, and it looks great.
Kind of,
then you can play with the lighting a lot better, where you got lighting on 3D models,
some great shadow effects art when you're with the kind of lamp in the dark cave during Primrose's section. I remember it was like, wow,
that's
awesome.
God, that game is going to get talked about a lot. You kind of, with everything, all the rumors going on and things, it kind of goes to the back of your mind, but like, it's only like a month and a bit away, and that game is gonna do stuff.
So the game that I think would be great as a pixel art game is a series which has constantly had controversy over its art style. Some people love it, some people hate it. Constantly, always has issues. Xenoblade Chronicles, Bally.
Right. Okay.
Xenoblade is a game that in its gameplay I'm not sure would transfer particularly well to a 2D style because it is very action-based. I think that you could do it. I think it's possible. But all I'm thinking about is Chrono Trigger is fucking gorgeous. Still one of the best-looking games of all time. Can you imagine the original Xenoblade in a Chrono Trigger style with kind of top-down pixel art and exploring the Bionis and Meconis
that would be cool.
World? Yeah. It would be so, like... As far as like demakes go, I really like the idea of demakes, which there's this channel on YouTube who does like, what if Silent Hill, or not Silent Hill, let me think, The Witcher was done in the PS1 style, and then he does like this whole montage of this like little gameplay section that he's rendered of like a PS1 version of this modern game, and I love that idea. Like, he did Cuphead on the Game Boy is one of them, and cool. So I've seen some like 8-bit pixel art of Shulk before in the past. I'm like, that looks pretty good. Imagine if you put that into a Chrono Trigger style kind of aesthetic and just had a big JRPG like that. I think that would be amazing, because people had problems with the faces in the original Xenoblade, and in Xenoblade X they still had problems with the faces, and then in Xenoblade 2 it was like, oh, it's too anime, but no one would complain if Xenoblade was in a beautiful, crisp pixel art style. Definitely think it would force them to change up how that game plays for sure, though, because I don't know, maybe it would be interesting to see if they could do it to be more action based in a 2D sense. I think it's probably be a lot of clutter on the screen, right? Because you have so much shit on the screen anyway, as it is, even in Xenoblade 2.
How you keep up that action and clutter, it'd be interesting to see. Yeah.
Again, but the one thing you do lose in that sense is the scope, right? One of my favorite things about the original is like, look at the Meconis, it's just standing over
the distance,
the knee.
And
that's
amazing.
That sense of scale and place is awesome. And to some extent, I think old JRPGs evoked that. Like, I think Final Fantasy VI has a sense of scale to it, definitely. There are places you go to that are like, wow, this is large. And imposing.
It'll be interesting to see how Octopath does that scale as well. Like, I'm looking forward to it. Because you're right, the thing that stood out to me the most was those caves and the lighting, or in the bar with like Primrose, etc. Like that kind of scene looked incredible. But when you get that sort of character looking out over a cliff edge or something, if that looks just as impressive, it'd be interesting.
Yeah. Before we move on, the other one that I was thinking of, if they had done this for the 2D game that they put out, I would have been way more interested. Pikmin. What if they did another 2D Pikmin game, but it was in pixel art? That would be awesome. I think that would work so nicely. I think would just look really good. And you can do some smart things with it, which I don't think Hey Pikmin particularly did any smart things. It was an RSS developed game. So
very middling reviews.
Very middling.
Put me right off. But yeah, Brandon, great question. Thank you very much. We'll see what the future entails for Pixelart and Hybit and things like that.
Yes.
So our next question is from Tim from Discord. Question for this show: If you could either go back in time or erase your memories so that you could replay a game again for the very first time, what game would you choose? I was thinking about this the other day because I was getting nostalgic about Pokemon again. But every time I actually play a Pokemon game nowadays, I lose interest almost immediately. It has totally lost its magic for me, which is a real shame. So my answer would be Pokemon Sapphire or Emerald. Some of the other answers I personally considered for this question were Breath of the Wild, Harvest Moon, Friends of Mineral Town, and Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic.
Okay, this is a good question. I like this one because I often think about this in relation to certain games.
I feel it every time I finish a really awesome game.
Yes, yeah.
Almost, yeah.
When you're reflecting on it after a while, it's like, oh, God, I wish I... Like, because a few for me are kind of story-based things as well, where it's like, I can't get that exact experience again because I kind of know what's coming. But Bally, where do you go first when you think about this question?
Breath of the Wild is the obvious one.
Yes.
I think when I finished that game, and even after I sort of discovered a new area, I was like, oh, the fact I've discovered this whole new area means that there's one less area that I will discover in the rest of this game.
Right?
I was kind of really trying not to reveal too much of the map at once, and that was tough. So that for sure. I'd like to play Ocarina of Time without knowing that Zelda was Sheik.
Anything, yeah.
I think
that would be nice.
I think that Ocarina of Time actually has a pretty good story, and there's twists and turns. Obviously, Zelda being Sheik, Sheik being Zelda. I think that's an interesting one. I think there's so much zany stuff and crazy stuff that happens that you're not expecting in Earthbound that I would love to play that. Blind.
That's a good one.
And here's a weird one, but I'd love to not know about the existence of Smash Brothers, and then all of a sudden someone tells me, like, there's a game that like has all the Nintendo characters fighting each other, and me to just be like, you got to be kidding me. That can't be the case. And then for them to reveal it, and then I play through that game and then experience all these characters and their movesets. So that's a
slightly different thing, I guess, in terms of what if Smash Brothers came out and no one knew any of the characters in it, and the whole game was you just finding that out. And we kind of had that in Melee. We knew what the characters were, obviously, because of magazines and all that shit.
Sure.
But it was much more mysterious back then about how to unlock them and how do you get Luigi. And will Bally run around his house screaming his head off? Yes, guaranteed that will happen. So yeah, that was back in the day. That I think, like, when I walked in on you playing Melee for the first time, I was like, oh my God, what is this magical, majestic thing?
Incredible.
Special. I would say obviously Breath of the Wild. The first 20 hours of Breath of the Wild might be my most favorite 20 hours of anything ever. It was astonishing, just constantly surprised and bewildered and just joyful. It's unlike anything I've played. So that was just pure magic. I want to go back and relive the memory of me sitting in the toilet early 6 a.m. after I got Pokemon Blue. That was great. Just figuring out what the hell Pokemon was, and like I knew what Pokemon was because of the trading card game and everything, but playing the game for the first time, it was the first game I super got into. That is a big one. And then sticking on the Pokemon train, Pokemon Diamond, man, like the whole discovery of competitive and playing that with you and Ali T for the first time and going, to his house and all three of us.
Avoiding CCF.
Yes, just all the stuff going on. Just the discovery of Pokemon Diamond was amazing. It was just so much fun, and everything that followed through with that. I guess like just learning how to play competitively is one of those things that there is a real rush and a magic to the first few games you have online where you're like, oh my God, like I'm playing a real person, I'm out thinking a real person.
And then eventually like a real burnout at the same time, so like having that experience again would be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of those things that's like a once in a lifetime, like, oh my God, it was the first real online game that we were so engaged with on a deeper level, and yeah, there was nothing like that experience. And then my other three are all recent games I've played in the time since the podcast has happened. Persona 4 Golden. Oh my God, it's magic. It is my favorite, like, Japanese game. It's my favorite JRPG. It's like the best simulator of just friends being around and having a good time and just doing this weird, crazy, cozy place. It's just the best. I love it. It's my favorite thing. Persona 4 Golden. It's an amazing experience. I love it. Danganronpa is a story that is crazy and weird and out there. And all of those games, I would say the first one probably is the one that I want to re-experience the most, because it was the introduction. I was like, what the fuck is going on? This is so insane. Like, that series is amazing. And then The Witcher 3 just consumed me for summer of 2015. And I did as much as I could, every side quest, everything possible in The Witcher 3. Again, like, that and Breath of the Wild are the two kind of pinnacles of open world games for me, for completely different reasons for both of them. And yeah, just uncovering that story again and figuring out the choices I wanted to make and all that stuff is high on my list of, like, I would love to erase that memory.
I want to play God of War again. That was great. I loved it so much.
Your first real experience with a kind of big
it's
Western AAA game.
Story, learning the action, and fighting combos, and I really enjoy that game a whole lot more than I thought I was going to. And it really hooked me in right to the end. And it's a very long game, so that was impressive, especially for my first PS4 proper experience, you might say.
Absolutely. All right, I think those are the main ones for me. Anything else that you have, Bally?
Wii Sports.
That's a good one, actually. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
you know, that was such a. I think we were all a bit stunned when we first. Well, first we were shocked at the size of the Wiimotes. They were absolutely tiny.
I came in the door and I was like, "This is tiny.
It's tiny.
What?
Is that fake? You picked up a fake Wii?
Yeah, I thought it was like one of those thingies that you get Pez dispensers or whatever. I thought it was one of those. I was like, what?
But that feeling of the first tennis ball that you strike and you're like, oh my god, it felt natural. And even as someone who plays or played a lot of tennis at the time, I was like, this kind of feels right. It feels good. Like this feels incredible. I think that was a big moment, even if it's not, that sort of motion controls haven't stood the test of time.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Are there any more from you, MBZ?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
But yeah, it's great question again from Tim. Thank you very much. And for anyone else who'd like to send us an email, please send it to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Or you can do as Tim and Brandon did today. You can send us a message on Discord. So head on over to our Twitter account. It's @TNL Podcast. Hit the link and you'll be right into our Discord server. You can join the chat. You can post a question. You can say how awful the prequel trilogy is in Star Wars if you want. Like, there's loads of things you can do on Discord. So join us over there. There's a good sort of, I think we're almost at about 70 people over there, all chatting, getting along. So yeah, it's a good time. But that's all we've got time for the second segment. Join us in the third segment, where we will be discussing a couple of big rumors. Don't go anywhere.
Alright everyone, welcome back to the third and final part of the show. This week it seemed like E3 has come early. Also, maybe things that will be shown at E3 have been delivered to us by certain leaks that people may believe, they may not believe. We're in an era now, Bally, where I feel like there's no secrecy anymore, and E3 is never gonna again have that aura that it used to, where people can just drop bombs all the time.
I mean, Nintendo are normally the ones who don't muck it up, and now this time it seems that they're the ones that they're in the same ballpark as everyone else, whereas before it felt like they weren't leaked quite as much. And I guess they're not leaked as much as the others still, but this is pretty big for them, it seems.
Well, you could say that in one sense, but I would argue that in these two cases, they're the two cases which make the most sense, right? Okay, so what we're going to be talking about is the leak of the Pokemon game, which apparently are called Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, and the Starfox racing game that Retro Studios is potentially working on.
Starfox Grand Prix.
Grand Prix, right, which I don't know if that's the real name. It could be a working title still. We don't know. There's a logo of it. We don't know. So the reason I say that both of these are particularly interesting and not necessarily indicative of Nintendo losing their grasp on the leaks or anything like that is that one of these is not directly controlled by them. It's controlled by the Pokemon Company, and they are kind of off on their own. It's a whole different set of people who have a whole different bunch of stuff to deal with, and so because Nintendo don't wholly own the Pokemon IP or the franchise, and also because Pokemon is not really an E3 thing anyway, it's usually on its own merit. It has its own directs, it does its own announcements, it's in Korokoro magazine. I think that makes sense. And the other one is that Retro Studios is a Western developer for Nintendo. And as a result, I don't think it is as locked down as, say, inside of NCL in Kyoto in that building where secrecy is paramount, right? Yeah. And because of that, like, you have this Western studio that there's probably going to be people chatting about it. And obviously because the press here doesn't have direct access to the Japanese kind of development scene, obviously because there's translation issues there, but also like cultural barriers and also just physical like distance barriers, you're not going to have people talking to Western leakers or journalists or whatever. And so with Retro Studios, that's much more likely to happen just because, they speak English and they're based in America.
Yeah, so, I can't remember the last time something that was internally developed by Nintendo was leaked.
Yes. I don't know. Because you think about it, the black box that is that building in Kyoto, which you have stood outside of.
Well, I mean, that video that Nintendo Minute did showed the entirety of the insides of that building, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, totally, because they went in all the secret rooms and everything. No, they didn't see shit, right? Because that stuff is so locked down. It's on a need-to-know basis, and it's like the whole video game industry is so incredibly secretive, and people have talked about it for a while, like the differences between the movie industry and all these other places that, we know that a film is being written like as soon as someone has a name attached to it. Whereas video games, for whatever reason, the entire industry is just incredibly locked behind doors. So as a result, E3 is a thing that constantly builds hype and excitement because there are surprises and people announce things. And I still think that Nintendo has a good hold on that stuff, at least as far as their internal development goes.
Yeah.
But we should talk about these because they're pretty big news if they are true. And I think at this point, both of them seem to be like, if there's smoke, there's fire. The Pokemon one may be a bit more obvious because it's like there's direct registration happening with domain names and stuff, and that's linked back to previous stuff that has happened, whereas the retro one's a little bit more shaky ground, but there are so many people saying it, and also people who I trust are saying that they've heard about this, that I think that we're in a situation where likely both of these are true, right? And so we haven't seen anything of this stuff so far, but we have a good idea that there is going to be this style of game coming. And let's start with the Pokemon one. So Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, these domain names have been registered, and apparently they are going to be the next Pokemon games on Nintendo Switch. Are they the next generation? What does this mean? There's a few details that have kind of come out. So apparently it's a remake of Yellow, and you're going to basically be choosing, Eevee and Pikachu as your two Pokemon potentially. I wonder if you have a choice between the originals as well, if you can go Squirtle, Bulbasaur, Charmander,
or if it's like Yellow where you get all three.
Maybe, yeah, that could be a potential thing, right? You're forced to start with either Pikachu or Eevee, and then you eventually get the rest of them as you go on. And if it is a remake of Yellow, that would make sense, right? But the other stuff in here, which has me a little worried, is not only in the name, but apparently in the gameplay. Pokemon Go is going to be a big influence. Apparently, Patricia Hernandez from Kotaku tweeted a while ago that Game Freak were looking into ways to connect the main Pokemon series to Pokemon Go. And it seems like this might be coming to fruition here, where there is going to be a connection to it in some way, which I don't know what that means, whether it means transferring Pokemon over or something like that. Or maybe, I don't know, acting in a Street Pass capacity, potentially. If they could do that on your phone, then you bring it back home and put it on the Switch, that could be cool. But also the idea of catching Pokemon is similar to Pokemon Go, which I don't know what that necessarily means, right? Because as far as I recall from Pokemon Go, you just flick your thumb on the screen to throw the Pokeball, and you would have to have it in touchscreen mode to do that on the Switch. And that seems a weird thing. It's like, are you just manually throwing a Pokeball this time? You're gonna use motion controls to throw a Pokeball? That's all that says to me, which, in all honesty, is the least offensive thing they could take from Pokemon Go, from my standpoint.
Yeah, the whole thing sounds like they're following the money, and that's what Pokemon Company do traditionally.
Yeah, they do. Yes,
they don't reinvent the formula, and Pokemon Go was obviously such a huge success.
Yeah,
that knowing that they're trying to link the two together, and obviously we weren't big fans at all of Pokemon Go, and I appreciate the idea, and I appreciate what it did, societally, and the amount of chatter it created. That was cool. I loved that. But I've been meaning to play Pokemon Sun for a very long time. I've not played a Pokemon
It's the
game.
Ongoing joke that I have right now is Bally will never finish
I will
Pokemon
beat that
Sun.
game this year, but I returning to Kanto and the red, blue, yellow era, it excites me for sure. But the second you talk about Pokemon Go integration, that's kind of I don't know. There's something about that really is a turn off for me. And a huge one for me, of course, is, what does this game look like? Is it going to be a proper step up from Alola in terms of graphics and what art style they're going for? Because XY and Sun Moon, that art style, it looks nice, but it's not. It could be better. There are way better looking games on 3DS, and there's no reason that Pokemon shouldn't also be a better looking game. And now that they're on an HD console, I think that the threshold for what people like me who are maybe a bit skeptical of the Pokemon series, our threshold of what we can handle when it comes to a good looking game, I'd love to see it just look a lot better than what I'm worried that it will end up looking like, which I think it will look. I think it's going to be one of the ugliest Switch games out there, to be honest.
So there was a potential quote-unquote leaked screenshot, which was a trainer riding on a Lapras with an Eevee on their head. And it was very blurred. It was kind of off-screen. And it looked like Pokemon Sun and Moon, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It just looked the same. Kind of pseudo-isometric view, 3D, but not very impressive. And to be honest, I feel like there is going to be a jump eventually, but I don't think that jump is happening anytime soon.
No.
And the reason is that they were told last year, oh shit, we need to get a Pokemon game sorted so that we can say at E3 we have a Pokemon game coming. That's not a long time for development to happen. It's not a long time for them to get themselves sorted and to put out a game that is representative of a big shift. And we've talked about, how Game Freak don't make the best looking games. Even, I constantly compared Yokai Watch and how good that looked with its full 3D constantly to Pokemon, which can't even handle 3D and yet is one of the worst looking games still on 3DS. Has a pretty awful frame rate, especially when you get into doubles and triples battles. Dear Christ, I want to hear some stories from when you get eventually to play Pokemon Sun, because I played the demo of that, and in the totem battles where you have multiple Pokemon on screen, Jesus, the frame rate was tanking horribly. It was really, really bad. So I imagine that this game is a stopgap, right? It's simple because it's a remake of Pokemon Yellow. It allows them to find their feet with Switch development hardware. It lets them experiment a little bit. It allows them to leverage Pokemon Go with the name of this game and then also building it in. And it also cashes in on nostalgia, which is why Pokemon Go was such a success. And there was also some stuff floating around saying that it would potentially only have the first 151 Pokemon in it as well.
That would be quite cool, I actually think.
As an idea, yeah, of just like simplifying it, of like, God, there's so much fucking fluff. But also, the other thing is, this company likes to sell merchandise, and the hundreds and hundreds of Pokemon were a great way for them to sell merchandise, and if they start reducing it down and killing those off, which I don't think they'll eventually do, I think this may just be just for this game, right? But the other issue is there's Pokemon Bank to think about. What about all these people who have played since, ostensibly you could have your GBA Pokemon right now on your 3DS. Like, you could do a transfer from GBA all the way to 3DS right now and still hold on to that Swampert that you beat the Elite Four with back in the day on Pokemon Sapphire, which my Swampert, I should try and eventually get that somewhere, because I always thought it was a cool idea for a video to be like, okay, I'm going to take this Pokemon Sapphire cartridge and see how long it takes me to take a Pokemon from here all the way to the most recent edition.
Right.
But what do those people do? The competitive people, right? Because that completely changes the way that you think about the game, and it reduces the number of possibilities and options, which for me actually is a great thing, because it was becoming very bloated and very power creepy. It was, even by Generation 5, it was a little bit unstable. So paring it down is cool, but also it takes away a lot of the depth and strategy that built over the years. And I wonder if them going back now is indicative of where they'll go in the future. Do you think that them cleaning the slate and potentially going back to the start means that they want to have a fresh start with a new game? Or do you think they're just going to cave and be like, oh no, next one has 800 Pokemon now and it's Generation 8 and all that stuff?
I think the generations will continue, but just simply because they have consistently been successful. Yeah. But I think the fact that the remakes have also consistently been successful means that they'll keep wanting to do that. And I do think the original 150 will always stay special to them, both as a brand and as like a separate identity. And I think this is just a time where we've not had that original 150 identity so clearly outlined in the game since Fire Red, Leaf Green. So they've just decided, right, launch of Switch, this is launch of Pokemon on Switch, this is a huge opportunity to really cater to the people who are like our age and above, who remember
the lapsed Pokemon fans,
Pokemon fans, precisely, who are brought back on board through stuff like Pokemon Go, who are like, I remember these Pokemon, and linking all that together, it just seems like the economically smart thing to do, even if it does create perhaps one of the more dry Pokemon experiences, but we'll see. I think the rumor that Red and Blue play a role in the story, I think, is a neat idea. Like, those are great characters to use, and I'd love if they did a hot take on that original story that was in Yellow and in the anime, because that's what people can relate to when it comes to Pokemon in terms of a story.
Right, that's the thing we were talking about a little bit beforehand, is because it's Pokemon Yellow, it means they can bring in Team Rocket. It means they can, have these moments from the anime more realized in this time in a setting where they could actually make that look more legitimate than it did back on the Game Boy, right? Obviously, you had the battle splash screen beforehand where they had like Jesse and James and Meowth standing there, and you could see them, and it's like, oh, that's cool, that's from that show I watched. But now you could do a whole bunch of cutscene stuff, which could, they could be, blasting off again into the sky, and it would actually look like the anime potentially this time. So there's nostalgia to cash in on there, obviously. I also just think that generally remakes are easier to do because a lot of the design work is done for you. Now, clearly, they're going to have to remake the entire region because it's not been done in 3D before, but the basis of each town, the kind of ideas of the gym leaders, all that stuff is set in stone already, so it lends itself to a shorter development time because they don't have to worry as much about that. I'm sure they add a bunch of stuff because that's what they do anyway, like new areas, like add a battle tower, all that other stuff. And then potentially, which I haven't seen a huge number of people talk about, but they could make a surprise. Like, what if you do go back to Johto? What if there is a kind of secret ending where it's like, oh hey, we did this in Gold and Silver, we're doing it again. It's a cool thing, and because
I worry they want to do another game for that is the problem.
Yes, obviously, but like it's a nice callback, I think, and it's a thing people have been asking for years. It's like, oh, can we just have that one time where we go back to a previous region again in a Pokemon game? Because it was always amazing that first time, and we never did it again.
Right.
And I think that could be very cool if they pull it off, but.
It's going to take a lot to get us excited about this, but
yes,
it might. I think if you can provide a kick-ass trailer, I'd be in. I just need some reassurances.
The other thing, which is interesting, which was brought up on RFN, is will people know that this is a mainline Pokemon game, or are they actually going to market it as such? Like, will this be marketed as much as a remake of Ruby and Sapphire as a mainline Pokemon game, or will it be marketed as much as X and Y as a mainline Pokemon game? Because the naming convention of it is very weird. We've had a lot of different things. We've had, gemstones and colors and, I guess DNA strands, if you think of X and Y in that way.
Right.
This is a sentence. It's like, let's go, Pikachu. It's a very different thing than what they've done before. Do you think they're going to struggle with the marketing, or are they making the job a bit easier by putting the names of these recognizable characters in the titles themselves?
I think that when you imagine Pokemon Sun and Moon, for a lapsed Pokemon fan, that means nothing to you.
Sure.
Whereas Let's Go Pikachu, I think, massively appeals, where you're like, right, everyone knows who Pikachu is, and I know
that word "go" was in the thing, yeah.
So put those two together, and you might actually get enough traction where they might watch a trailer and be interested and and notice it and the chatter. And of course, you're going to get people who get confused between the two, but maybe that benefits this product. You never know. Like it could. I think that it's interesting that Eevee is the second choice alongside Pikachu. I think that's cool. I think there's a lot of opportunity with Eevee, and I think most Pokemon fans maybe find Eevee a bit more exciting than Pikachu just because it evolves into so many forms.
Right,
but,
yes.
It'll be interesting to see whether that combined name recognition will help this game, because I think for sure with Pikachu, he's the biggest character in video games, arguably, alongside
potentially
Mario.
Yeah.
It's huge.
I do wonder, and I think that whatever happens, this is going to sell a stupid fucking amount because it's a Pokemon game. I definitely think that there will be a shift in Pokemon. It's not this year, and I don't think it'll be next year either. I think they need some time to figure out what the next step is in the evolution of this franchise. And because Nintendo want them to get a game out, hopefully this year as soon as possible, because they want to sell 20 million Switches this year, this makes total sense. It's like, yes, this is the formula. It's like they went to the lab and they're like, okay, what gets us from this many million Switches to this many million? And it was like, okay, let's do this, and this. This is the Pokemon game. Almost like a lab experiment feels like, potentially.
It's the FIFA of Nintendo, the Call of Duty of Nintendo.
Yes,
and
it is, yeah.
For the first time, it's actually on their mainline home console. And that's going to be huge for them, no matter how bad I think this game is, arguably.
Right, and I don't know. I don't know if Game Freak feels that way, is the fact that they're on a mainline home console. They're like, well, we can't make it sound like the other ones because we're a handheld company and we want Nintendo to do another handheld. But it's like, well, this is your future now, Game Freak. You got to deal with this more powerful hardware in which your games will look markedly worse next to all these other competition, even though obviously that doesn't matter because Pokemon will sell more than most other games anyway. So
yeah.
So there you go. Pokemon, Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee. Are they real? Probably. Will we see them E3? Maybe. I'm sure that they'll get revealed soon. But in any case, let's move on to the other news that is maybe a bit more shaky, but to me way more exciting and interesting.
Oh yeah.
Retro Studios, Bally, the creators of the Metro Prime series, and of course your favorite game in the history of the universe, Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze, are apparently working on a Starfox racing game called Starfox Grand Prix, which is supposed to be similar to Diddy Kong Racing, and maybe have some F-Zero elements thrown in there. I don't know how fast it's going to be, but the idea of Diddy Kong Racing being that it has a full-blown single-player mode where you have races and boss fights and a hub world and everything Mario Kart doesn't give us, essentially. This, when I first saw it, I was like, well, this sounds like that stupid Metroid cross Starfox rumor from like 3 years ago before E3, and I was like, well, that sounded no way true back then. This kind of sounds no way true, but there are so many people talking about it, and it seems like, hey, it's probably true, and people have been sent logos which look pretty official. I need your thoughts here, Bally. Is this what you thought Retro would be working on? Are you happy that Retro are working on this? How do you feel overall?
I am happy that Retro are working on something like this. I think it's outside of the box. I mean, we all know the absolute hatred and ridicule that Tropical Freeze received when that trailer was originally revealed. And I mean, that game was great, obviously, but I think that it is important that Retro move on to something a bit different, and this is certainly different. I think this is the most different sounding Nintendo game I've heard of in a very long time. I love the concept. I think that if you told me Star Fox was coming back after Star Fox Zero in the next decade, I would have been shocked. And as you say, like, we don't know how, these rumors seem pretty legitimate, and like there's a lot of people collaborating, agreeing that yes, this seems right. I think it's incredibly exciting. We've always questioned where Nintendo go next with their racing series. Obviously Mario Kart's the huge one, and then F-Zero and Wave Race have really been left at the side, but to take the Star Fox series there, considering that for many they've thought Star Fox Zero was so stale, and you can argue that Star Fox is basically the same game 3 times over, and I can buy that argument, like it very much is in many ways. This is the perfect way to move away from that criticism, and I think including the biggest criticism of Mario Kart since the DS version is there's no single player campaign, and like the DS version was so famous for having that great story mode. Story mode is maybe too much, but a mission mode. Yeah. And this game might have a full on story, and single player campaign just sounds perfect. Throw in obviously multiplayer and online capabilities, and I think the hints that we've seen with regards to there's some shooting elements, there's some like obviously flying around in space elements, and boss fights like in a racing game sounds fascinating, and I'm absolutely dying to see a trailer for this at E3 and some gameplay, because I think everyone has some vague idea in their head what this will kind of look like, but I think finally seeing what this game could be is going to be incredible.
Yeah, I definitely feel way more positive about it just because of the pedigree of the studio. Now, obviously, the idea that Retro are the same company that they were back in 2002, whatever, when Metroid Prime first came out, is a fallacy, because that's just not the case. Like, there are different people who work there. It's not the same company, and we can't say it is. And it's one of those interesting things, I think, over the years of like people come to expect certain video game companies to do certain things, but obviously they're never the same company because people come and go all the time. And even like the people who worked on the Donkey Kong series, I don't know how many of those people are left there. But it does sound that like, so along with this news is the news that Retro were also working on another game that had been struggling in development, and there had been rumors going around that Kensuke Tanabe, who was the guy who, from Nintendo's side, who had always managed Retro Studios, who had worked with them on Prime and on Donkey Kong, had some kind of falling out with them, or Retro didn't want him involved anymore. They thought they could go on their own without kind of oversight. And so he basically, like, he went over to Next Level to help them with Federation Force, and he's done some other games since then as well, but he's basically not working with Retro Studios anymore. He is now working with a team, whoever it is who's making Metro Prime 4, But the lack of Tanabe probably meant that they had to get someone else in, and I don't know how that stuff was going, but apparently this other project not doing too hot. Apparently either cancelled or has been put on the back burner. So Retro being a 2-game studio at this point, they have this Starfox racing game, they also had another game. And that makes sense, right? Because when you think about it, Starfox racing game doesn't scream 4-year development cycle to you, does it? Like it seems...
No.
Like a much lower budget type of game. Obviously, like they have to do more than a Mario Kart because they're doing a full story mode and everything, but a kart racer doesn't sound like the kind of resources that a big open world thing would take. And I don't know what their other game was, if it was something in that vein, but it seems a little... I think people will be a little bit annoyed by this news, if only because there was the promise that Retro were probably doing something else, and it unfortunately hasn't coalesced.
I can hear Liam Robertson as we speak trying to get that information on what was cancelled. And we'll see a video in like 10 years' time. I would be
fascinated to see what Retro were working on. And who knows, they could still pick it up later down the line. Like after this game comes out, they could potentially figure out a way to, make that, whatever it is, a thing that people can eventually play. But right now we have this, and I think it is something that I am interested in. As someone who doesn't like Starfox, who hasn't bought Mario Kart 8 on Switch, this really is the perfect lineup filler for me personally. It's like, okay, this style of game I want on my system. I don't want to buy Mario Kart again because I played a fuck ton of that. Starfox is a series that I'm pretty bad at and I don't enjoy, but if you put it in the context of a racing game with some fun elements like the single player, then yeah, I'm absolutely down to that. And also, it's developed by this company who, as we said, has a great track record. So overall, for me, it's definitely interesting and intriguing. I want to see what kind of art style they've gone with, because that's one of the other things that I think Star Fox Zero suffered from, was its just lack of identity. It didn't feel like it had any personality whatsoever. It almost looked like an N64 games in the simplicity of the polygons, and maybe that was their...
Careful, they're going to make the whole thing out of wool.
Well, oh boy, I'll tell you what. The thing that really in my mind, I was kind of imagining this the other day of like, how fucking crazy would it be? But you know the puppet stuff they did at E3 with Star Fox?
Yeah,
I've fucking insane would it be if they took that art style and used that?
I would worry that like the Switch probably can't handle it, but that would be amazing.
It would take so many resources to make something like that. Can you imagine just
I would love those
the amount of
puppets
detail?
To return.
But also, like, Thunderbirds or whatever it is was Miyamoto's inspiration for Star Fox in the first place, right? And so the idea of puppets being an art style that Nintendo could work with seems possible. Retro obviously haven't done that kind of same thing as Woolly World and Epic Yarn and what Goodfeel have worked on in the past, but it's possible. That could be cool. And I think the other thing is Star Fox needs a good game in his portfolio in order to kind of freshen the franchise up and make it seem like this is a series that can be revived and we can do something different with. I think, you saw that with Zelda to some extent. Breath of the Wild isn't really a Zelda game. Like, it is a Zelda game, but also not really. And it revitalized that franchise and revitalized people's interest in it. And Star Fox, as we've said, like, they basically made the same game again and again, and they can't be doing that, because otherwise what you have is a situation where people who like it will buy it anyway. People who don't like it they don't get an in. They don't have something different to make them think, oh, now I want this instead.
Yeah.
And by making it a more accessible genre, by making it something that is currently very lacking on the market, because I imagine this being more in the vein of a kart racer than a normal racing game, right? Like, obviously, they'll probably have land vehicles with the tank and air stuff with the R-Wings. Potentially, I don't know, sea stuff, submarine.
I'll be interested if it is more kart racing in the sense of weapons and things like that, or...
Yes.
I mean...
That's what I feel. It's like, it's probably going to have interactions in terms of shooting stuff. And I don't know if that means shooting enemy races, if it means shooting environmental stuff to change the track as it goes along, if it interacts with bosses, or if you, like... I think someone was saying that you could like shoot enemies and get boost from it potentially. Like, that's an interesting idea. But that's what I'm thinking. It's less about the pure racing and more about the periphery around the racing as well.
I hope there will be some pure racing in there as well, because there are parts of Starfox where you are having to fly through very narrow areas and tilt the R-wing and do things like this and fly through corridors and that side of things, where I hope there's narrow areas that focus on the skill in the driving and the flying, and then separate more open areas where you can like try and shoot your enemy down, that sort of thing. And it can, I'm thinking more Sonic All-Stars Racing. I don't know. I think that I'm just fascinated because there's so many directions this could go. You could do something that is a lot more, I say simmy if you were flying a spaceship, like an F-Zero, or it could be, as you say, just weapons galore with Mario Kart, and the blue shell might return, one might say, but
oh boy, no.
I don't know. It can be anything, and you're right. I think the fact Retro are potentially working on this is a huge relief with such a bold idea, and it's now just a case of we want to see if this is true, and will we see a trailer at E3?
Yeah. I think they have to at this point, right? Like, this wouldn't have leaked otherwise. We're in the lead up.
And it's got to be this year,
E3.
surely. It's got to be.
Right, because, like, we don't know what Nintendo has for the second half. It's basically a mystery. I'm trying to think. Have they announced anything for the second half of this year?
No,
There's
Smash
Octopath
Brothers.
in July. There's Smash, obviously. Smash is the big one, right? That's what we'll see most of at E3 is Smash Brothers.
Well, that's it. I mean, there's that Yoshi Switch game.
Yes, whenever that's coming out.
You'd imagine that'd be second half of this year, but we'll see.
Yeah, other than that, so you need to fill some slots. This slides in there nicely, I imagine.
We're gonna do predictions next episode, MBZ.
Oh yeah, no, that's potential. The thing I feel this year is like it's less interesting in terms of predictions, just because a lot of it feels like a lot of the field is known.
We got to go a lot more specific, you might say. We got to
go but like with this retro leak, with the Pokemon stuff happening, and also with like Best Buy Canada just fucking dumping a whole bunch of shit of all the other games coming to E3, it kind of feels like maybe a bit of an off year. Not in the sense that like there won't be surprises. I'm sure there will be some, but it's like, okay, like we're kind of in this weird space where PS4 is maybe winding down in the next couple of years. Switch is taking off.
I mean, now it's not just Nintendo who aren't at E3; it's Sony as well. Like,
oh
it's
yeah,
just,
clearly, Sony.
Microsoft,
they've already announced everything. Yep. I mean, Microsoft. What the hell are they going to do? That's going to be I'm very interested to watch their press conference, honestly, because they need to do something. It's going to be a great year, I think, in terms of just figuring shit out. Like there won't necessarily, as I said, be the craziness, but sometimes you need that to kind of figure out the landscape of what's going on. And I do think the most interesting thing for Switch going into E3 is, okay, it's been out over a year. What do the third parties have? Like, are we going to see Switch pop up at EA's press conference? Are they going to talk about Bethesda? Yeah, Bethesda going to show the next big Bethesda game and it's on Switch? I don't think so, because that seems quite ambitious, but it's a possibility, right? With the fact that they are putting out Wolfenstein 2, that's coming out later this year as well. That's another third-party game. Do we see some crazy shit? Does Miyamoto walk out with Phil Spencer on Microsoft stage to do some Banjo-Kazooie and Smash nonsense?
Whoa.
Like, does crazy shit like that happen? Because there's a potential. I don't know. It seems like Microsoft are in a place right now where they are willing to make those decisions. Yeah, there's a lot up in the air. But the last thing I want to talk about is Starfox. What do you think about this name, Starfox Grand Prix? Do you like it? Do you think that's what they're going to stick with?
It's fine, and it does what it says on the tin, you'd imagine.
Yeah.
I the second you start replacing the word Grand Prix with something a bit more, I don't know, spacey, you might be moving away from the point a bit. Whereas I think it's very clear that it's Starfox and it's a racing game. So I like it. It works. It's fine. It's nothing special, but I wouldn't want to try anything too out there.
I think the interesting thing is that apparently one of the endings in Star Fox Command is an ending where they go off and join the G0 as opposed to F0, the G0 Racing League. They turn their R-Wings into like race vehicles and they like participate in these races, which I'm not sure if they'll try and lore-wise link that in some stupid way. But look, there's potential there, right? So it's not stupid. And also there's the F-Zero link with the human James McCloud being represented in the F-Zero series. I don't know, there could be some fun cameos popping up in this game potentially. So yeah, I don't know. This overall, both these leaks are simultaneously obvious and simultaneously what the fuck. Like on both ends, we're getting both kind of experiences here. It's like, okay, the Pokemon company are doing the Pokemon thing, and Retro Studios are doing this crazy Starfox racing game. So Nintendo are in both camps right now, which I think is good. I think they should be there most of the time, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Bally, we have more things coming up in the future because E3 is happening. Do you want to tell the folks what our plans are for the next episode and E3 and all that stuff?
Let's go for E3 plans. So, this episode that we are recording right now will come out on Monday, the 28th of May. Very importantly, the next show will be on 8th or 9th of June, we're thinking. So this is going to give you a few days before Nintendo's presentation on June the 12th, which is a Tuesday. So the next numbered episode, which will be 100 and I'll be on 18 for next episode. Yeah. 118 will come out on Friday or Saturday, the 8th or 9th of June. And then on Tuesday, that's going to be our big prediction special. That's going to be...
It's 119, by the way, I think, because 170 was the last episode, but yeah.
So episode 119 will come out 8th or 9th of June, and that's our big prediction special. You want to get all our hot takes before E3, and then come E3 week on the day of Nintendo's presentation on June the 12th, which is, as I said, a Tuesday, we will look to watch their presentation and record our hot takes and get that uploaded on that day, on the 12th, and then post E3 we'll be back to our normal timing, and the next episode will be the 25th of June, where we'll have a post E3 cooldown and follow up on any more news coming out then.
So yeah, a lot to look forward to, and of course with E3 happening and coming, we need some of your predictions as well to throw into the mix. So if you have any of those, you can send them to our email address, which is Bally,
ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com.
Absolutely. We would also like to thank all the people who support us on Patreon, especially our higher tier supporters. Bally, who are they?
Yes, our $10 tier supporters, my girlfriend Caroline and Atari Alex. Thank you so much for your support. We'd also like to plug our most recent Patreon exclusive podcast, where we covered in depth maybe not that in depth, but we skirted over quite a lot of Marvel films out there. So we covered the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that is, of course, for our TNL Takes tier, which is $5. But for $5, you can now download all 6 episodes that we've done on Patreon. So you're getting your bang for your buck. The more episodes that we record. So if you'd like to support us on Patreon and listen to our hot takes on the Marvel Cinematic Universe and our hot take on Infinity War, you definitely want to check that out.
Yes, that is patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. Very easy when it's there. You can find us on YouTube as well. We're on youtube.com/ThisNintendoLife. You can also find our backlog club after E3. That's when we're going to do it. So that is Punch Out on Wii. You can download it on the Wii U through the Virtual Console. You can probably find a copy somewhere on eBay. It's probably not too expensive. I think Wii games are going to get expensive soon, but right now they seem to be at a steady price. But you can play it and play along with us, and that will probably be after E3, as I say. But it's a shorter game, so hopefully people will be able to get along with that one, and that'll be fun. And then, yeah, you can find us in all the different places. You can find the podcast on Twitter at TNL Podcast. That is where all the updates and things go. Links to our Discord, links to YouTube, all that other stuff. You can find me at LordNBZ. Bally, where can people find you?
Find me on Twitter. I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91.
Excellent. You can also obviously review and rate us on iTunes and download us on all these podcasting apps. Wherever you can find a podcast app, it usually will have us. We're on what's the other one? Not Spotify.
Stitcher,
that's the one. There you
That's
go. The S's. So yep, download us there. Find us in all these places. Around E3 is a good time to throw some reviews down, because there's going to be people looking for E3 podcasts. So I'd really appreciate it if someone could go out there and throw us another review, and we'll read that out on the show if we get some. So do that, all that good stuff. Yeah, man, I'm excited. E3's coming up, so it's going to be a good time. We'll see you soon in less than a couple of weeks' time with the next episode. So, yeah, anything, Bally, before you close out? How are you feeling in this run-up?
Very excited. Looking forward to a lot of Giant Bomb coverage. That's the highlight.
Drowning in it, for sure. So that will be great, and we hope that you will look forward to it too. We'll see you then when it happens. All the good stuff. Until then, thank you everyone for listening. We'll be back soon. Goodbye. The musical interludes used on today's episode were It's Arbor Day from Runner 3, Copyright Choice Provisions 2018, and the main theme from Sushi Striker, The Way of Sushido, Copyright Nintendo 2018.